So welcome to another video in the Oakland offices. You might, by the time this comes out, have already seen a load come out from myself and Greg from the Data Literacy Academy. This time we're talking about something entirely different. First of all, you'll see that we all got the memo for green tops today in the office, so we are on brand, and you'll have to apologize. You'll have to ignore my voice for we've picked the only day where I've had a cold in the last 3 months. But today is to talk about AI. Everybody out there is talking about AI. We've been doing some work in the background to investigate, invest, and figure out what our approach to AI is. And as always with Oakland, we will be releasing one of our famous guides. However, this time, we wanted to bring the people behind the guide in front of the camera, partly because of those of you who have a minimal attention span. Instead of jumping straight into the guide, you can watch our series of short videos to get you up to speed, but it's also a different content for you to consume and learn about our approach to all things AI. So before we jump in, I'd like to introduce you to the guys that do sit behind our guide and have invested in figuring out what we're going to say about AI. Mike, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Joe Morgan. I'm a principal consultant and AI product lead here at Oakland.
Hi, my name is Mike Galadek. I'm the AI engineering lead here at Oakland, so I've had the coding of the AI agents.
So we'll get on to agents. That's a small snippet of what's to come. So everybody out there in the market's talking about it. All of our clients seem to be talking about it and asking questions. So what are we hearing out there in the market? What is it that people are asking about or talking about with generative AI?
I mean, potentially before that, we should probably do a history lesson of AI and what we're actually talking about here, which is large language model capability and the ability of large machine learning models to generate text and to take a semantic understanding of what that text means. This comes out of a lot of the machine learning work that's been done over the last 10, 15 years with deep learning and neural nets. But with the rise of big large language models like ChatGPT or Gemini or other ones from big tech players, we've been able to harness the power of like semantic understanding and augment the applications that we're building with these language understanding and processing capabilities. And it's that we're going to talk about today, in particular, the generative AI portion of it. I appreciate that in the AI landscape, people talk about machine learning, or they talk about statistics, or they talk about predictions from other models. But today, I think we're just focusing on that generative AI.
Cool. So if we're focusing on that, what are our clients saying? What are the questions that they're asking in relation to what Mike's just described?
Well, I think firstly, our clients are really excited. So there's a huge opportunity here. I mean, I guess to build on what Mike said, this is a huge leap forward in terms of what AI can do, particularly in the generative space. I guess when I reflect back on the client conversations that we've had, it's also not quite as easy as it sounds. So for a lot of our clients, the organizations we speak to, they've got going, which is brilliant. They might have done a proof of concept. They might have brought some of their data together with some off-the-shelf AI tools and got a first project over the line. And what we often hear is, that's great, that generated some excitement, it gave everybody a demo, it started to bring to life the power of AI for stakeholders in that organization. But the question that comes up really quickly is, well, what next? So where, and I guess in the current climate particularly, it's always about, well, where's the ROI? How am I actually going to make a difference with this? How am I going to get value out of this technology? And what we found quite a few clients, and but with our partner organizations as well, is it's quite easy to get dragged into what I call a proof of concept trap. And what that means is you can get a first project out there, you can generate some excitement, but then it kind of fizzles out. It doesn't really stick into the organization. And then you almost go back to the start of that cycle. You have another idea, you do another proof of concept. Everyone gets really excited and then it fizzles out again. And I guess we've been a little bit later to come out with some of what we think about AI because of that, because we're looking at that problem and we're thinking, what's going wrong here? This technology is really powerful, everyone's really excited, but a lot of companies aren't making that next step where they're really getting value and making a difference for their customers. And when we reflect on that, what we're often struck by is, what's the preparedness of the AI think working in this company? So if you think about the technology is there and it's powerful, but your business is unique. You have your own processes, your own challenges, your own complexity, and you're not going to be able to just wave all of that away because AI has come along or because you want to do a proof of concept or a new solve a new problem with Gen AI. And really, therefore, the question that we've been thinking about is, how do we get the AI ready for you? Because your business is complicated, you have your own challenges, and you can't wait 10 or 15 years to do some huge transformation to get yourselves ready for AI. So when we're sort of talking to clients, when we're putting out our thought leadership, you can read about it in our guide, the question we always want to start with is the AI ready for you? How do we make it that you can take the sort of enormous power that's inherent in the AI that Mike talked about and put it right in the middle of your business, not on the side as a demonstrator or a proof of concept that entertains people over their lunch break, but as something that's really going to make a difference for years, if not decades to come.
So that's really interesting, Joe. You set a really good context there of like what we're hearing in the market. We've got a bit of history of where this has all come from. But one of our big mantras is how we bridge the imagination gap. So you've alluded to there's no shortage of, shiny new tool or silver bullet or, I've got a chatbot. So what's the real opportunity? If we've got all the hype, why is it not really happening in the way people expect? And why are people getting stuck at that POC level?
Yeah, well, so I think there's two things I would say. So I think the first one is thinking really hard about the capability of the AI solutions that you're building. So if you put this into a human context, chatbots are, a really powerful example of how AI can be put to work, but they're just one example of a huge range of tasks that might exist in a business. And if you think about, you had a new employee and they came in and they read all of your documentation and then they sat slumped in a chair until you asked them a question and they would answer that question and slump back in their chair, you wouldn't really be that impressed, would you? And I think, the same is really true for AI. If we're really serious about activating the potential of this technology in a commercial context, and you've got to think, how is it going to make a difference for me? And it's not to say there isn't a really powerful place for chatbots in things like services environments, but really, if we want to get after the big stuff, if you want to really move the dial on the big problems that your business is facing, we need to think a little bit beyond that, and that comes down to the knowledge that you equip these AI solutions with, the influence that you give them, the task orientation that you create around them, and also the way you train and educate people to use them. Because, we all know in our own lives that the technology that fits most seamlessly into what we're doing is what we adopt, and the ones that don't are the ones where you get friction and everyone gets really frustrated with it or they just ignore it. So that's one part of it. And I think the other part is thinking the right way about what is this opportunity for my business and where does the value lie? So, we're in the business of making money here. We're not in the business of just entertaining people or grabbing their attention for a minute on social media. And really for us at Oakland, it comes back to that everything data mantra of unstructured data is the prize that's on offer with AI for both for us and for our clients. So, if you take a simple stat from Gartner, 90% of the data that businesses hold is unstructured. It's not in neat rows and columns, a data warehouse or a spreadsheet. It's audio files, it's free text, it's images, and particularly in the space of language models and generative AI, it's that free text information that really for decades businesses have been sat on safety reports, customer feedback, correspondence, all of that kind of stuff has had a huge sort of rich seam of insight within it, but it's just been too expensive to analyze. And if you think about you're a business leader and you're wanting to get after some of that insight, then someone has to read it and interpret it and think about it. And until very recently, your only option was to employ some people to do that. And that can be very expensive, and it can also, depending on the task, be quite dull for those people.
Indeed.
Suddenly with AI, you have these almost endlessly scalable virtual workers that you can take to that data. And I guess, everyone watching this, I would urge them to think, how much insight could you be sat on in your business as previously it's just been too expensive and too time consuming to analyze? If you can unlock that, then you can make huge gains. But then, as always with these things, there's a but. You have to have solutions that have the power to make a real influence in the business. And secondly, you really have to have some clear, tangibly valuable problems that you want to solve. And, real risk with AI. This isn't the next blockchain. It is huge. The capability that's on offer is like nothing we've had access to before in a commercial environment. But you have to use it in meaningful ways to solve real problems, not just for a demo or to get people excited. To say you're ready for AI or you've done it, that will inevitably end up back in that POC track we talked about before.
Cool. So that's a really interesting stat. 90% of an organization's data is in unstructured data. So even just at that level, clearly there's an opportunity to go after. There's something big enough that people should be paying attention to, but how do we do that? What is the technology that helps us do that? Mike, can you just give us some insight of like what's been our approach as Oakland to how we grab hold of that opportunity?
Sure thing. So from a technical perspective, let's just take a step back and talk about large language models for a second, because they do text generation, but they also are effectively reasoning engines, which allows them to create and, if given sufficient tooling, execute plans.
Okay.
And if we think about the unstructured data that people have, so that 90%, and I imagine that people watching this video will be trying to imagine the 90% of unstructured data that their business has in their head and trying to work out why it's so large, because businesses don't in general store vast quantities of text just on its own.
Yeah.
But what is a much more familiar situation to our customers and what we hear in the market is that businesses are made of lots and lots of different components that all have, say, for example, similar spreadsheets that execute similar processes, but these spreadsheets were written in this department, these ones were written a long time ago in this one, and they're still used, and they do similar things, but they don't match.
Yep.
And they don't match in a programmatic way that a data scientist could come along and do some column matchings, anything like that.
Yeah.
But if a human sat down and worked it out, they could match those things together.
Yeah.
However, that would take an enormous quantity of time for them to do that, and is a very expensive way of solving that problem. What we have with large language models is a reasoning and understanding engine that allows for processes like that example to be executed at scale by a computer at the wish of the customer or whoever's commissioned the project. And that really is what is new technically, is that we've got computers that can understand and reason, and then they can, in our agent framework, take actions in the real world. And this is another thing that we're trying to get our customers and market to think about, is to move away from the call and response chatbot nature of large language models.
Yeah.
Because when you think about AI, a lot of people are thinking about ChatGPT, or they're thinking about their favorite chatbot interface. And that really is, I ask you a question and you give me an answer.
Yeah.
But really what we need the market to be doing is to be thinking about where these large language model reasoning agents can sit inside their process. Because the input doesn't have to be a question. As Joe alluded to earlier, you don't, as an employee, sit around waiting for somebody to ask you a question. You take actions in and of yourself, given the responses and the things you have going on in your environment. That's what agents can do. If given the right inputs, and that input doesn't have to be a question, it can be a spreadsheet, it can be a piece of data, it can be a time of day. They can then execute plans that they have reasoned out for themselves on top of this 90% of unstructured data to get it to talk to the business at large and derive insights from it. And then, given sufficient tooling, take actions in the real world like an employee would.
And we've seen, haven't we, that through the conversation we're already having with clients and some of the projects we've spun up, it's quite easy to run out of questions if you only have a chatbot type interface. Like once I've asked it the half dozen questions about my sales data, it's sort of like, well, now.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And one of the things that the agents can bring to the large language model party is an understanding of what is important. Unlike technology that has come before, you can ask value-driven questions to these agents because they have an understanding of the world around them if augmented with sufficient information.
Yeah.
So you are, in the old world of machine learning, you were effectively matching patterns. And you were saying, I wish to find every instance of this word in our documentation. Simple sort of find and replace type things. Whereas what large language models are allowing us to do, especially with the agent capability, is ask deeper, more interesting questions like what has changed about my data in the last 24 hours that I should be paying attention to,
Yes.
which are human-like behaviors that this technology is allowing computers to now do.
So Mike, in that previous snapshot, you talked about agents, intelligent agents, etc. Just enlighten us a bit, do a deep dive on what is an intelligent agent.
Sure. So fundamentally, a large language model is a language generation machine. It writes down the next most probable word in a sequence. But using that capability, what we can do is, given the right prompting, we can ask a large language model to write down a plan to execute and solve a problem, and then follow that plan. What we've done is taken that reasoning capability and put it inside our Oakland intelligent framework, which is where we have got a highly scalable and customizable set of agents that follow that process. And we can augment them with environmental awareness. So whatever it is on the front that they need to respond to, which might be a question posed by a user, but it could equally be an email or a change in a spreadsheet or another piece of data added to a blob. But then they will write down a plan to solve the problem that they've been posed, and then follow that plan with the tooling that we have given to be able to solve that problem, whether that be understanding, whether that be to send an email, to send a text, to change something in the outside world, to read it, an augmented set of sensor capability, or even consult some documentation over here, and then produce some kind of output. But at its core, what an agent and the agent framework is that reasoning capability to be able to plan things and then solve problems in the real world.
Cool. I think. So some of you may have heard I'm not a very technical CTO. So Joe, give me that in layman's terms.
Yeah, well, I think the thing to hinge on is what Mike said at the end there, which is solve problems in the real world. And if you think about, your sort of typical kind of early stage chatbot implementation, you've got the sort of immense generative natural language power of AI, but it's also quite inert. It doesn't really do anything. You kind of think of it like a brain in a jar. So what we're trying to do with intelligent agents and the Oakland intelligent agent framework is take that brain and give it the awareness, the tools and the influence to climb out of that jar and make a real difference in your business. And in simple terms, that's the power of intelligent agents. And the thing for me is actually this really comes to life when you think about it in the context of a real business example. It's all very well to talk about AI can do this or that, but let's, I'm going to turn the tables on you a little bit now. And I know you've been working on a really good example of an intelligent agent in action with one of our clients. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so bring it into life, like you say. So large critical national infrastructure organization, I guess like many industrial utilitarian sort of organizations, thousands upon thousands of lessons learned about how they do stuff, capital projects, etc. And they asked us to come and build initially a chatbot type capability using what Mike's just described technically to read across all of those lessons learned. So imagine basically a bunch of Word documents in SharePoint in essence, and pull all of that together using an LLM to then derive an insight out of that. And interesting, we talked before about chatbots. We utilized the chatbot interface initially to sort of test that the AI can do what AI says it can do. And gave us a reason to go, it is finding the insights, it is spotting where there's commonality, it is being able to lift out lessons learned and say, don't do this, that's a ridiculous idea. But what we've been able to now do is take that step further and embed that back into a business process. So as a project manager, if I'm about to launch a new project, it knows to call out that I'm about to make the same mistake as the 10,000 plus lessons learned documents that we just interrogated. And I can avoid that and save money, save time, save lives even. So that's a real world example of where, thousands upon thousands of lessons learned information, back to your point earlier, there's huge amounts of value captured in that. It's really hard to extrapolate because you need a person to sit and read all of that content, but also context, understanding what that means in that environment of the client, et cetera, et cetera. And so we've brought that all to life and got their data talking back to them such that they can improve a business process.
Sounds amazing. And I guess the other bit I wanted to just quickly probe around that was, I think we're even thinking about taking that a step further. Like we've built obviously some really valuable interfaces. The data could talk back and tell you, how do we take that insight proactively to people?
So I think some of it is you can create some alerts back into the business. It'll email back out to sort of the project management community, for example, to say, actually, we've now spotted that there are 500 other projects that are about to perform the same thing and create a further risk. Or you need to be aware this new risk has come about, because we're constantly reading. It's not like we've done one read of the SharePoint site and never to touch it again. They are creating project documentation week after week after week. So that capability sits there on top of that content all the time, generating more output, so I can feed that back out to the business in a proactive way as part of a business process. It's also, I think, helping. There's a few examples popping up where they're able to take that and improve their submission. So there is a process that they have to submit that plan to get approval to run the project. So why don't we use that to help them make sure they pass that submission in the first place, rather than take projects that are never going to pass because they're about to make the same mistake again. So there's more and more proactive sort of reaching back out, using those lessons to teach people what to avoid next time around, and that corporate memory.
Talking to agents having an impact in the real world, we have another project that we're doing where we are thinking about a similar company to that one, where they have a number of frontline operatives who have to triage alerts that come in from across their infrastructure network. And they have many alerts that come in. And one of the things that they have to do is they have to assess the level of importance that those alerts have. And they do that using a number of criteria, which are fuzzy, these criteria that they have for triaging whether or not they should take an action or whether this alert can be saved for later. And it's based on a large number of things, including documentation. There's a certain amount of corporate memory and notes that have been written down. Things like local environmental factors take place. So whether the weather is acting up or whether an event has occurred at that place recently. They have to look across the infrastructure network that they have as well and assess other alerts that have come in and the pattern of alerts that these pieces of infrastructure have had in the past. All of that is like a reasonably well-defined pattern of things that the frontline operative has to execute, but they have to execute this every single time for every single one that comes in. And this is where agents can really, really shine, because you can take the inputs, which is the alert coming in, and all of that supporting documentation, all of that environmental information, all of the surrounding pieces of information that the alert has with it. And then you have to make a judgment. And this is a prototype that we're running where we are taking these agents and these large language models and allowing them to use their reasoning capability over all of that huge quantity of unstructured information and then make a judgment.
Yeah.
They're doing real work.
They are doing actual work, yes.
So cool. We talked a lot about why AI, generative AI is a thing. We talked about sort of our approach to it and actually how we're doing some of that with our clients, what they're sort of getting from that. But if I'm sat at home listening to this, I've either been given the remit to go, come on then, what we do with AI, or as a board member, I'm going, well, I need to figure out what we're going to do with AI. Where would somebody start? What's the sort of characteristics or things I need to look out for so that I pick the right starting point and sort of set myself up for success?
Yeah, so I think the first most important thing you can do is pick the right problem to solve. And the most important advice I could give there is pick a problem that is already acknowledged to be in existence and it will be valuable to solve it. So the worst thing you can do, and this isn't just about AI, it's about any sort of technology-led change, is don't invent a problem because it would be convenient for you to solve that problem with technology. You have to start with is, what are the problems that people already have? What are the challenges that your organization is grappling with? And really, when you've got that problem set, the next thing to do is to think, well, which of these problems is a good candidate to be solvable with an AI or an intelligent agent-powered solution? And really what you're looking for there is two things. The first thing you're looking for is the tasks that would solve that problem are repeatable, thinking-based activities, which is the sort of thing that AI is good at. So that could be summarizing and interpreting information, checking things against clear standards, producing structured, repeatable outputs. Those kind of tasks are things that AI is really likely to perform well at. And then the second thing that you've got to think really clearly about is, does the business, in whatever format, even if it's unstructured and spread around, have the data and the process information to train and equip your intelligent agent with your AI solution to solve that problem? Because if you don't, exactly as in a human context, if you can't tell someone what to do and where they can find the information about the task, you won't get very far. And for me, that is how you go about getting started and finding those problems that you want to solve.
I mean, that's backed up with the technical requirements for an agent problem as well, because unlike in other areas of computing, the language portion of the problem that you have is incredibly important to the agents that are built, because they are relying on clear articulation of the problem that you have, basically as part of their core mechanic that makes an agent, because it is a language understanding object. And so you have to be able to articulate your problem well in order for the technical half of the solution to actually work. Otherwise, because it is a large language model, it won't know what to do. You give it imprecise instructions or you give it misleading information, then it will do the incorrect thing. And just to back up your point, what they're not very good at is accessing information that is somehow you are going to need to have the sufficient data to solve this problem available to the agent.
And I think just to build on what Mike said there, sort of final thing to add would be, don't just think about the problem you want to solve, but give some thought to how you want to solve it. And we talked at the start of this series of videos about getting caught in a proof of concept trap, or building really limited solutions, or getting dragged into the paradigm of building a chatbot when it might not be the right answer. I guess the sort of advice I would give is, think about how you would solve that problem. If you were given that task in your job at work, what would you do? Because you probably wouldn't, in most cases, just do Q&A or just read the documents and summarize them and hope someone picks up the answer. You would want to get out there. You would want to be proactive. You would want to make real differences in the world or in the context of your organization. And I think if you're thinking about, how do I not just find a good problem to solve, but solve it in a way that sticks and adds value? That's a really powerful way to go about it. Is what would you do if you had your chance to solve that problem at work? Would you just do Q&A, or would you go further? And if you would go further, what is it that you would do? And that often will set you up really well when you're thinking about, that first project or that first AI solution that you want to bring to bear on your organization is, what would I do? How will I make a real difference?
So we've jumped into a bit of the what. Mike, you've used the term agent, intelligent agents, intelligent agent framework. Just enlighten us a bit. Dive into what does that really mean?
Yeah, so an agent is a piece of software that really puts the I in AI. So artificial intelligence, and the agent capability is where the intelligence comes from. Okay. Because a large language model at its core is predicting the next word in any given sequence. But to you or I, we can leverage that to ask it a problem and ask it to make a plan and then execute that plan. Okay. To you or I, that looks like intelligence. That is a low level of the ability to do things in the real world. And there's a little bit more technical stuff to it than that. But by asking a large language model to create plans, execute them, and then giving them the right tooling to fulfill those requests, you've got yourself an agent.
Cool. And to the layman, to the person that stood there in a business, Joe, I don't know why I'm coming to you to sort of simplify that, but go with it. Well, what's the super simple version of what Mike's just said?
Yeah, and you can watch for Mike pulling a face.
Yeah, okay. But trying not to flinch.
Yeah, but the simplest, the way I like to understand this is, you can think of an intelligent agent as like a virtual worker. So if we go back to what Mike said, it can do things in the real world. That's really where the difference lies, is when you've got sort of, a large language model or just a large language model powered chatbot, you've got something quite inert really. It can do Q&A, but a lot more, and that doesn't solve you that many problems. When you've got an intelligent agent, you're talking about taking the brain and the intelligence from those things and equipping it with the tools, the influence, the task orientation, the awareness to go out and apply that intelligence to business problems. And that's where you get value. That's where we all add value for our jobs at work as well, is we don't just sit and think, we apply that intelligence and we do things. And when I like to, it's a simplification, but when I think about intelligent agents, if you're starting to get your head around it, that virtual worker is a really good place to start.
So don't just think, do.
exactly that.
So thanks, guys. I think that's been really helpful to sort of open the book on the guide a bit. And as I said at the start, bring the people from behind the guide in front of the camera instead for once. I guess before people go, what would be your sort of closing remarks? What are the sort of takeaways that you would want people to walk away from hearing these videos?
So look, we've talked a lot about, building solutions that can stick in a complex business environment. We've talked about the power of intelligent agents. The one thing I would end on is speed. And I think we're at a point where we've had tech hype cycles before. Genuinely, it would be understandable if people were a bit skeptical. And, for us, we've seen enough of what this AI can do to know that this isn't the next blockchain. It has enormous opportunities in a commercial context, but really being able to prove that value to an internal audience at speed is what's really setting apart the organizations we've spoken to that have succeeded. And it's that tricky balancing act of, just throwing something together that bounces straight off the complexity of the business won't work. But if you need months and years to get these things going, people will disengage and they'll start to see this as R&D, not ROI, basically.
Cool. I mean, that would be my closing remark also, would be a shameless plug for the Oakland framework to address this problem of speed. We have the pre-built templates and capabilities that these agents can grab hold of and be embedded in the process of a company. If we were to show up and do it, it could be done. We have those guys ready to go. So
showing up ready to build, not showing up ready to figure out what to build, I guess. Cool. So look, the guide is going out there. It is the long form version of this video. So if you do have the attention span, I urge you to download it and take a read and get in contact. Thank you for watching our video today.